talk about what they're saying, the new doomsday clock was moved because of the war in Ukraine and Russia. Now, there's no doubt that the Biden administration, Western governments, Australia, UK, New Zealand, the EU, the European nations have all been on the side of Ukraine, all proponing, at least the US, Canada, and the UK, as well as Europe, giving weapons into Ukraine. And I think this is the reason why it got moved up is the foreign minister of Germany admitted basically we need to support Ukraine because we're in a war with Russia. Now that's very telling. And I think maybe a lot of backroom talk has been done that way, but now she said it publicly. We are in a war with Russia, speaking of NATO, speaking of Germany. And that sent the doomsday clock people pushing the clock ahead to what destruction would be like. And at the same time, alerting everybody around that, hey, this is a war that has been going on since last February, and now it's still here with no sign of ending. There's really no off-ramp. There's no one talking about peace. For as much as, in some cases, I agree with Donald Trump, sometimes I disagree with them. In this case, I agree with them. He says, why isn't anybody talking about peace? All you need is nukes to fly, and then everybody's going to start flying nukes. Why don't we just end it with peace? On the one hand, I totally agree. Why isn't nobody talking with peace? Nobody's talking about peace. Biden administration, the UK, the EU, all are saying, let's arm, escalate. And at some point, I think Russia is going to take that very seriously. And it might be now. We're approaching a year into the war, and the Russians are now so invested in this war. Personally, Davey, I don't think they're going to back down that easily. I don't know what's your take on it, but I think we're on a track of a collision because I don't think Russia's going to back down. I don't think that NATO's going to back down. I think there's so much money that has gone into this war by the Biden administration specifically that I don't think anyone's going to say, you know what, we're just messing around. We're just kidding. It's not that serious. Let's take it back. I think it's just going to escalate. What's your take on the war?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, Marco. I think it's only going to escalate, especially now with the talk that the NATO forces are talking about wanting to take back Crimea.
Yeah,
I think it's only going to escalate. With the money that's being poured in, like Canada is going to follow the US lead now and send more weapons, tanks and stuff. And the German minister having actually come out openly, basically saying that we're at war with Russia. We've got that declaration of war now. But I saw a good video on Twitter during the week. Someone had taken the song out of Evita, and the money kept rolling in. And just with the weapons, the money that's been pouring into Ukraine, just the billions and billions, and then they still want more, and billions and billions. And yet they're still doing the same thing Eva Peronin did, living the lavish lifestyle, the mansions, the sports cars, while the average Ukrainian is living in poverty and struggling to get food.
Yeah.
And you're right. I think they all want this war because war is profitable for a lot of them. The Biden administration is making money. Ukraine's just been kind of like a money laundry facility for a lot of them.
It's the hub. It's the hub of all sorts of corruption.
But yeah, Putin's not going to sit by idly and not do nothing, especially if NATO forces decided they're going to try and annex Crimea back.
Yeah, let me tell you some of the weapons that are going there. And I think some people have said, well, it's not a big deal. They're not that big of an issue. But Lockheed said that they're ready for F-16s to go to Ukraine, F-16 fighter jets, 3 additional B-52 bombers flying to unknown locations. I'm not saying they're going to Ukraine, but maybe. Leopard tanks, Leopard 2 tanks from Germany, from Canada, other tanks from the US, Abrams tanks may be going there. So the one thing again, Davey, no attempts to negotiate for peace. In fact, Russia has said, well, if they're doing that, we're going to put our warships with hypersonic missiles in the Atlantic. So nobody is speaking peace. I guess one guy that would maybe, thinking about doing that is for peace is the Croatian president. The Croatian president, he calls Germany madness. He says, madness. Look what happened 70 years ago, he said. Russian forces and German forces went at it and millions died. I said, he doesn't want to see this again. I mean, there's, for all its faults and for all its, ungodliness that it's in the world, there are some people that still see, perhaps maybe not in a good light, but they still see peace as a way to get out of this mess. And, from Trump to Croatian president to others are talking about peace, but very few, very, very few. In fact, the minority. And you said money talks, it's very profitable. I think these high-ranking Ukrainian officials that got caught with corruption charges, from prostitution to racketeering, from, taking money, taking weapons, selling them. Nobody knows exactly all that has gone on. Canada is even giving more money to Ukraine. The IMF wants to give $16 billion more to Ukraine in aid package. So the money keeps flowing, corruption keeps growing, and nobody cares for peace.
Yeah, this is a war that they want to happen, unfortunately.
No, you're 100% right. Even I was listening to the Ukrainian Catholic Archbishop, which, it's not that I agree with Catholicism, but he's advising that all the corruption that's going on with Zelensky, all the things that he's doing against banning Orthodox communities within his own country, it's important to understand Zelensky is no friend of Ukrainian conservatives or religious Ukrainians, he says, because he's doing this to his own people, shutting them out at a time where, there's a need for hope, there's a need for peace, and there's a need for, maybe people to go and pray. Like I said, I'm not talking about, that I agree with the Catholic Church, but in need of hope and people that need to find God, he actually is becoming a dictator in that matter, that he's shutting down anybody who disagrees with them, because the Catholic Church as well as the Orthodox Church have been pretty boisterous about what he's been doing to Orthodox communities. So, we talked about it here, that he's no friend of, Zelensky's no friend of anybody except money.
Yep, totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't see it, I'm hoping I'm wrong. And I hope that I'm wrong big time. But I don't think this is going to de-escalate anytime soon. And I hate to think the fact that, it could be a war, but I think a war has been happening since last February. People have died, soldiers have been killed, civilians have been, arrested and killed as well. Money has been flowing, weapons have been sold or given to Ukraine, and Russians have gone into the eastern part of Ukraine. Now it's Donetsk and Luhansk is part of Russia territory. So it's escalated, and sometimes it's a little bit slow, and then it happens in burst, and then it's slow again, then it happens in burst, and we are where we are now. Hey Jay, you're back.
I'm back.
All right. We've been talking about the Ukrainian war and the Doomsday Clock, and part of the reason they moved it up was because of what's been going on with the armaments, Germany's seemingly declaration of war, and what Zelensky's doing, the corruption with the Ukrainian officials, the money flowing from even the IMF, Canada, the US. So should people be worried, Jay, or is it just going to blow over, in your opinion? Or maybe the extreme guys are really the ones that are right, that's saying, this is it, we're done.
Well, I guess I would answer with a question. Is there any war or large worldwide conflict that does not begin with Germany causing some kind of problem? And for the German representative to say that openly, it's very telling. It's very telling. Since when does a country that has relied on the US for so many years to provide their defense, provide for their defense, get the chutzpah to actually proclaim there's a war between the West and Russia.
Yeah.
To be clear, there's a war between Ukraine and Russia. And if you were to examine it, that conflict was bound to happen. But this proxy war, this Afghanistan in Europe, this is good for no one. Because now we're dealing with nuclear powers.
Yeah. So, I mean, I get why the doomsday clocks moved. And you know what? And David, we're talking about this. You know what? Perhaps, and maybe I'll take it from a different angle. This may wake people up to the reality that we are not immortal in a sense of, we're not going to live forever. We are, humanity is very fragile, and we need God. We need God to intervene in the affairs of man. And, we pushed them out so far into extreme circumstances in some countries. And look what's happened. Look what society becomes. Nations become without God. And perhaps by this just very active doomsday clock, it sounds apocalyptic, they said. And I would say, although it's not the end, as the Bible foretells the end will come in a different way, it is right for people to fear, and maybe they would consider God. Maybe they would consider repentance and faith and the only Savior that God has promised to this world, and that's Christ. That's Jesus Christ.